Hi, I'm Jeff Stickney, and I'd like to talk a little bit about my recent paper in the journal on seeing trees anew through the philosophies of Heidegger and Wittgenstein. Back in March of 2019, I took a group of scholars up through the monk's portal from the lecture halls to go look at the evergreen oak tree in the cloister, raising the question of whether we could see it anew through Wittgenstein and Heidegger. Now, Wittgenstein was somewhat skeptical. He wasn't sure if he could have this kind of direct effect on the way people would see things. And I also brought into line here Marie Baptiste, indigenous epistemology, where she talks about trying to use two-eyed seeing to see through her Mi'kmaq indigenous worldview and also through a Western scientific lens. And I question whether or not we can achieve that without being initiated into their culture and language. I'm drawing on Stephen Mulhall, whose early work in the 1990s used Heidegger and Wittgenstein to look at the as structure of our language and then how we grammatically construe the way things appear for us rather than having immediate perception of things. Now, later in his work, he questions whether non-human animals also have an as structure, think of octopi or cetaceans, whales, and whether they may not dwell as poetically or historically as we do, but may also see things in a richer way than perhaps Heidegger thought. He does distinguish between continuous seeing of objects, like we see a fork as cutlery, a tree as a tree, versus aspect dawning. In a way, I'm trying to use a genealogical approach here to shift our perspective using different arts and sciences, the humanities or liberal arts, and then also trying through this perspicuous lens then to try and think of, well, how do we actually conduct place-based environmental education when we take a group out? Well, we talk about the architecture. We talk about having gone to the archives. Thank you, New College, for sharing the images and archives. And we see how the oak tree was there 200 years ago, and then prior to that, different coniferous trees. And then we appreciate the architecture of this place going back to the 14th century, as well as its deep history, the people who are still buried beneath the Jurassic limestone floor of the 14th century cloister. We stood beside the tree and raised this question that Neil Everton shared, a natural alien, that is, are you inside or outside the tree? And he was thinking of how the tree is drawing water up through the root system, under the bark and the cambium layer to the treetop, to where the leaves have a little mouth in the bottom of them at the tips of the trees. And this little mouth or stoma then releases moisture into the air through evapotranspiration, as well as bringing in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. And then we realize that there are gases, aerosol gases, released around the tree. So I was raising the question, are you actually within this hydrosphere and this gas when you're in the cloister? Is the root system reaching under that floor as well? And are we with the tree, both in language, the minute we see it as a tree, as well as in a much more physical sense? As we're standing there, we're even appreciative of how our footprints are compacting the soil and perhaps bringing about the demise of the tree, seeing some branches recently sawn off. Now, this brings in the botanical science that we get through Suzanne Simard and through Diana Bursford Kroger, who kindly contributed to the special issue on climate crisis, as well as Colin Tudge. We talk about trees that are communicating with one another, transferring nutrients to offspring trees, as well as sharing pollen, that they're not isolated individuals, but live in communities. So when I noticed that there was an offspring evergreen oak tree over the wall by the library from the cloister there, I wondered if it was drawing in pollen from the two evergreen oak trees over on the mound. These trees are monoecious, they have male and sex organs, but they tend to draw the pollen from a different tree to create genetic diversity. So, now we're thinking of how the trees are linked through the wood wide web, but this makes them now present to hand in Heidegger's sense. Michael Bonnet was doing a keynote during the conference where he talked about the problems of scientism. Are we reducing now the tree to its functions? Well, it is giving us a greater appreciation. Michael also appreciates that. He and I both contributed a co-authored paper to the special issue on climate crisis to talk about in-place transcendence and how through aesthetics and place-based learning, we can come to appreciate the tree. Children just immediately start climbing in the tree. It's handily available to them. This is this notion of readiness to hand, how we use trees in our daily life, whereas we ordinarily see them. And then also we appreciate how it then shows up in our architecture, how we dwell with trees in an ongoing way. And, of course, the canopy of the forest does remind us of the arches in the cloister and in the cathedral here that we are heavily influenced by these tree forms. Paul Smeyers was standing there, Wittgenstein scholar, and as we were drawing the tree, we had pencil and paper. Amanda said, "Let's go touch the tree," and that was a great idea, the tactile way. But he reminded us of Maurice Merleau-Ponty talking about seeing the tree and feeling the trees looking back, and our union with the tree as we're engaged with it through artistic communion. These are really important that we bring in not only the sciences, but the humanities. Here are my children, they were whistling the Harry Potter theme here. Young people come and reenact scenes. It's like a film set. And, in that sense, it includes our ability to see the tree as something other than a film object. Stephen Mall laughs, at this and thank me for giving a different association. But I try to then bring in Mark Wynne, who is a student here. He used to come with Edmund Cusick and feel that he was receiving God here. He's a theologian now teaching at Oxford, as well as Harmony Sal, who is a hedge witch and talking about a pagan way of communing with the gods here. Now, I draw on the analogy of musical appreciation. How do we learn to get a musical ear? How do we know when a piece is right for the occasion? This kind of thing occurs over decades of practice and also enculturation and also formal training. But it gives us some hope that we can actually bring about different ways of experiencing things and coming to judge them. And I end with Wittgenstein's quote from Remarks on Fraser's Golden Bough, where he talks about this remarkable union of human and oak in many cultures, I think very much among the English, and Quercus robur, the English oak, and which shows up in the wainscoting and the tables, as well as the beams of New College that had to be replaced because of woodworm back at the turn of the century. So we dwell in close proximity with this wonderful substance, this wonderful being, the tree, but then also there's this vital separation that gives us pause for thought and possibly for veneration. And I really am appreciative of Diana Beresford Kroger and other advocates for reforesting the planet. I think maybe this is the way that we can avert the climate crisis if we come together and preserve trees and grow more trees. And hopefully that's what we're going to acquire as we gain this greater appreciation for these beings with whom we've dwelled for so much of our prehistory to the present. Well, I hope now you're encouraged to go and read the paper. And I think, I'll leave it to you there. It's so nice to have a chance to share this with you. And thank you to New College for letting us show the images. And I look forward to getting back there in 2022. How's that for PSGB? Cheers.